So let's kick things off and welcome back our esteemed guest, Victoria Guerrero, who we're super excited to have back. She is with the Small Business Administration. Victoria has been the district director at the U.S. Small Business Administration based in the warm Miami, Florida weather for now over 3 years. And she is one of our fantastic go-to experts from the Small Business Administration. She shares an enormous passion for helping small business owners navigate challenges and find solutions. And she's here today to share some timely information about really the last of the COVID relief programs that are available to you really just through the end of this year. So very timely information. And so let me start off by saying, welcome back, Victoria. It's great to have you here.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful to be here and be back with you, your team, and your small business community. So thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today.
Well, it's always a thrill to have you here. And today we're here to talk about COVID EIDL, which, for those folks that don't really know about the SBA and their relief programs, the term EIDL is something you see often after a natural disaster. But can you just tell people what EIDL stands for and what it's all about?
Absolutely. So EIDL is spelled EIDL. So it stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And it's really our flagship loan program for the SBA whenever there is any type of disaster. It could be forest fires, it could be mudslides, hurricanes, earthquakes. Whenever there's a natural disaster, the SBA comes out and helps small business owners with their economic injury disaster loan, their EIDL program. For the pandemic, for the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the COVID EIDL, which is slightly a little bit different. It has more flexible terms because the pandemic has lasted so long. So that, I believe, is what we're going to be kind of talking about today, because it's the very last program available for our small businesses that will offer COVID relief. So I'm very happy to be here with you today and kind of share some more information on the program.
Awesome. Well, it wasn't the only program the SBA had. And before we dive totally into EIDL, let's just talk real quickly about PPP, the loans that have been available to businesses, dating back to, I think it was April of 2020. When those first started happening, there's some really important things people need to know about forgiveness of those loans in terms of how quickly they need to apply so they just don't automatically convert into a loan. So if you have a PPP loan and you're thinking about doing forgiveness, Victoria, tell them a little bit about what they need to know about that.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. So sometimes people say, oh, it's a forgivable loan. PPP is a forgivable loan. So I use the funds and I don't have to do anything. It's forgiven. Well, it's not that simple. You do have to apply for forgiveness. So you have 10 months from the time that you exhausted all of your PPP funds. The clock starts ticking from that time moving forward. You have 10 months to apply for forgiveness. While the clock is moving, I always tell people apply as soon as you can, so you know that it's 100% forgiven. If you miss that 10 mark period, that forgivable loan turns into a traditional loan that you do have to pay back at 1% interest rate. So I always say, just for the peace of mind, if you have not applied for your PPP loan forgiveness, please do so. And the way you do that is by going back to the bank that gave you that particular loan and just letting them know that you're ready to apply for forgiveness. A lot of banks have their own portal that they go to, or you can go to the SBA's portal and you can apply online. So it's a very simple process.
That's fantastic. And, from the feedback that I've heard, because I've been on a bunch of calls with banks from around the country, is that the forgiveness process for loans that are less than 2 million has been fantastic in terms of the turnaround. So getting those in soon, you'll get your answers back quickly, but please do jump on that as fast as you can. Before we dive into EIDL, we just want to make mention of last week, Alignable launched a financing your business marketplace that has a lot of information about getting access to loans, who's providing loans, and some things that are happening in the industry. So if you haven't had a chance or you haven't seen that, we'll post that in the chat box. And after the discussion today, feel free to go there and check that out. After today's session, we'll also be sending out to everybody who registered a link to the recorded session. So you'll get that. And that will include all of the links that we talked about today. So we'll make sure you're well equipped. But let's talk a little bit about COVID EIDL and the fact that this is a loan. We're going to talk about a subcomponent of that. But what do businesses use COVID EIDL for? And can they apply for that if they've already gotten PPP lending or a loan under that? And tell us about the process.
Well, the wonderful thing about COVID EIDL is that you can apply for it. Even if you received PPP funds, or if you're a restaurant and you received the restaurant revitalization funds or a shuttered venue, you can use EIDL and apply for EIDL regardless of whether you received funding already from our other COVID relief programs. So always remember that you can do that. COVID is a traditional loan in the sense that you do have to pay it back. I've seen some people on the Q&As asking, does it have to be paid back? The answer is yes, it is a loan that does have to be paid back. The good thing about it is that the interest rate is 3.75% for profit entities. And for those that are private nonprofits, it's 2.75. And those entities have 30 years to pay it back. So potentially the payment is very small. And at some point, if you don't need the funding anymore, you can let the SBA know that, give back that portion of the funding that you didn't utilize. There's no penalty to that. So I always tell folks, if you feel you're going to need assistance to continue operating your business, go ahead and apply for EIDL. All you have to do is go to sba.gov/EIDL and apply online. This program does not go through the banks. It's directly with SBA. So you just apply online and we will be in contact with you because we are going to need some additional documents to be able to process the application.
And not too far back, they actually increased the amount of those loans, right?
Absolutely.
What is its maximum now?
It's 2 million. So on September 8th or September 9th, the president and our administrator Guzman made the announcement that they lifted the cap. Before, people were only allowed to apply for up to 500,000. Now they can apply up to $2 million. So as long as you meet the proper criteria and you have the proper documentation, you can actually apply for that. Or if you already applied previously, you can request an increase. And you do that by going to your portal and looking for the bluish greenish button that says request increase. So something very important. If you already have a loan or you already applied for a loan and you want to increase it, do not submit another application. Because Eric, what that happens is that people will then, it might be flagged for fraud, and it's just going to take longer. So if you need to increase your loan, just go to your portal, hit the increase button and follow the steps there.
That's a great tip. And these loans, like you said, are loans, and they have to be paid back. It's a long term on them, fairly, very reasonable interest rate. And as you go through that process, the thing that we kind of wanted to dive into a little bit further today was the targeted EIDL advanced component. And this is something that's really available to you only after you apply for the EIDL loan, right? So even if you don't want the proceeds from the loan, you have to go through in the loan application process. And then after you've submitted your loan, it will tell you whether you have the opportunity to get one of these grants. But can you tell people what this targeted advance is all about, and how would they know if they qualify, and where should they go to find out more about that?
Perfect. Yeah, those are great questions. And I've seen them pop up in the Q&As in the chat. So to get information on the targeted EIDL program, or the targeted advance program, and when I say advance, I mean grants, you would go to sba.gov/targeted advance. And if you forget that, just go to sba.gov/EIDL, EIDL. And there's a section there that you can click on targeted advance. So the way it works is exactly as you said, Eric. In order to obtain the grant portion, it was written into law that you have to apply for the actual EIDL loan. But there's some caveats to that. if you're a small business owner, you said, you know what, I don't want the loan because it's more debt, but I can use the grant money. You have the ability of telling SBA, I'm applying for the EIDL loan, but I want the grant, not the EIDL loan itself. So you can decline the EIDL loan. And if you qualify for the grant, you can still use the grant money. Or the other scenario that I see is people say, I don't want to apply because I'm going to get declined. I don't have this credit score. I qualify for the advance, but I don't have the credit score. I want folks to know that you can still potentially get that grant funding. So what you would need to do is still apply for EIDL. If SBA declines you for the EIDL loan, but you still qualify for the grant, then you're going to get an email from SBA saying you still qualify for the grant. Do you want it? Please, submit these documents. So even if you're declined for the actual traditional loan and you qualify for the grant, you can still get the grant money and utilize that. So there's some flexibility to that.
Fantastic. And when we're talking about these grants, right, they're grants, they're not loans. There's sort of two different levels of these, right? And so we're talking about a $10,000 grant and an additional $5,000 grant if you meet certain criteria. What's sort of the minimum criteria for getting access to that 10,000 component?
Well, the first thing I would do, Eric, is I would have folks go to sba.gov/target advance. Why? Because there's a mapping tool. There's a link on the very first half of the page. It'll say, before you apply, please check the map. And there's a link on there, and you click on that, and it's a US sensing map. And what you need to do is put in the address of your business headquarters, where you're located, your business, not your home address. Unless you work from your home and that's your registered business address, you would put that in there. And the map will tell you if you are in a low to moderate income area. And the reason why this is important is because for our advanced programs, that's one of the criteria. You need to be situated in a low to moderate income area. If you are, that's great. You meet that first criteria. The second criteria is that you need to be able to demonstrate that you have more than 30% reduction in revenue during the 8-week period beginning on March 2nd, 2020 or later. So you have to show a 30% reduction in revenue. And the third qualifier is that you have to have 300 employees or less. If you qualify for each of these items that I just mentioned, then you can potentially receive up to $10,000 in grant funding.
And so what we're talking about with that 8-week window is we're basically showing a 30% decline in revenue from before March to any period of time that is 8 weeks long since March, right?
Correct.
So that's all we have to kind of show. Great. Awesome. And then, so if I want to then get access to this additional $5,000, what's the criteria for that?
Well, you would need to, if you qualify for the targeted advance and an SBA sees that you qualify for the supplemental advance, which is the $5,000, you will get an email asking you if you want the additional $5,000. And if so, this is what you would need to provide us. So again, you need to be located in that low to moderate income area. Instead of showing a 30% reduction during an 8-week period beginning March 2nd of 2020 or later, you would need to show a 50% economic loss or a reduction in revenue instead of a 30. And you have to have less than 10 employees. So the supplemental is really for those individuals that were hit the hardest. They have less than 10 employees. Their revenue suffered a minimum of 50%, and they're located in the low to moderate income area.
Fantastic. And then I'm going to just do my pitch for time is of the essence here. These programs don't go on forever. When do they end?
Right now, the deadline is December 31st. So I always say, some people hate it when I say this, but the early bird gets the worm, right? Those of us that like to procrastinate, and sometimes I do that myself, we know time is really of the essence in this scenario. And sometimes I talk to small businesses that are going to like, oh, I don't need the money now, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden they need the money in the future. So I always say apply. And if you need the money, it's going to be there for you if you qualify and you get approved. And if at some point you no longer need the money, you can always send it back and there's no penalty.
Fantastic. And the other thing to note, folks, is that while they set the date at the end of December, they also limited the amount of funds available. So, the program ends when either the funding runs out or we get to that December date. And the last thing to point out is, under the new infrastructure bill that was recently passed by the House, they did claw back some of this money to fund that bill. They took 31 billion out of the EIDL program and 17 billion from the target advance component. While there's still a bunch of money left there, it has been reduced. So if you're interested in doing this, as Victoria said, sooner rather than later, get in and complete that EIDL loan application so that you get access to this, all of these great programs. So at this point, what I'm going to do is start to answer a bunch of the questions or I'm not going to answer them. I'm going to give you the questions, and we're going to get Victoria to answer. One of these questions is all about still after the PPP loans. And one of our members asked, can they still apply for any of those PPP loans, or are those completely expired at this point?
Exactly. That program is completely closed and expired. So there aren't any banks that are accepting any more applications because the program has closed.
And if you didn't, let's say you got PPP funding and you didn't apply for the loan forgiveness within the 10 months after you used it, can you still apply for forgiveness, or how does that all work?
Well, I would always say that you would need to speak with your lender, but the 10-month period, that is the time frame that you are given to apply for forgiveness. Typically, if you do not apply for forgiveness during that time frame, that loan turns, that forgivable loan turns into a regular loan that you do have to pay back within the terms provided when you signed the note, and it's at a 1% interest rate. But for PPP, it's different than EIDL, Eric, because PPP is managed through the banks. The banks are the delegated authority, which is a fancy way that SBA says that they're the ones in charge of managing those programs. The funding comes from the bank. So I would always suggest to any small business owner that has any questions regarding their PPP forgiveness process is to contact the bank that provided them the funds, and they should be able to assist them.
Great. And you mentioned this earlier about the EIDL, increasing your EIDL amounts. But I just saw another question from one of our members, Akina, who wrote, can you reapply for grant funding if you've already received it? And maybe answer that question if you've applied for for EIDL loans or grants, because I'm not sure which one she was actually talking about.
Okay.
So let's start with the first one. If I applied for an EIDL loan and I want to increase it, what's my best way of doing that?
The best way and the quickest way is to go to your portal and go and look for the bluish greenish button that says increase request. And when you click on their request increase, when you click on there, it's going to take you to another page that you will have to follow the information on there. And this way, that increase is going to be attached to your original application. So that is the best way to do it. If for some reason you cannot find that bluish greenish button, you can email our team, who they're dedicated only on working on these increase requests that come in. And if you can give me a second, or I don't know if one of your team members has that email, I can put it here on the chat for everyone. It's pdc.reconsideration@sba.gov. So if you cannot find your bluish greenish button on your portal, the second best thing you can do, and I'm going to put it on the chat right now, is to email the team directly and let them know that you are requesting an increase. That would be the second best way of doing it.
Great. Now, early on, there was sort of an EIDL grant component of the CARES Act. Is that different from the EIDL grants today? So if I got that, $10,000 grant way back when, can I still apply for this other EIDL and supplemental grants?
The way it would work is that in the first grant, the one, the very initial one way back when, originally that formula, if I remember correctly, was 1,000 per W-2 employee that you had on payroll. So some people didn't get the entire 10,000. Some people only got 6,000 or 3,000. For those who did not get the entire 10,000, you can apply for this particular targeted advance. And if you qualify, you can potentially get the difference so you can be up to 10,000. So if you got 6,000 the first time around, you can potentially get 4,000 this time around. So you can get the entire 10,000 advance.
That's fantastic. As that clarification helped me understand that a lot better. So thank you for that one.
No worries.
So we've got a couple of questions, and we had this in the last section, but this one's from Pat, where they've applied for the loan. So they've gone through the process of applying for the EIDL loan, and they can't get any feedback in terms of where their loan sits right now. It went into this black hole. They're trying to get answers. They're not getting answers. What do I do if I really want to try and figure out, did my loan get approved? Did it get rejected? What can I do? And there's just really not getting any information that they need from the places that they know of. So where else can they turn to?
Perfect. If it's if it's the first time that they're requesting a status on their particular EIDL loan, they can email disaster customer service at sba.gov, and I'll put that on the chat. Or they can contact their local SBA office. And although our local SBA office, we don't have access per se to go deep into the applications. So what we can do is serve as an advocate for the small business owner and forward that email to the project team. And they themselves will then let us know what the status is, what are the next steps, and they will either contact the small business themselves or they will contact the district office, and the district office will then communicate that with the small business. So that's another way to do it. And if you want to know how to contact your district office, I'm going to put that in the chat. You go to sba.gov/local-assistance and just put in your zip code, and it's going to give you all of the information on your contact information for your local SBA office, as well as our resource partners, which can also help you with any questions you may have.
Fantastic. And each one of those offices has a whole waft of staff that you can reach out to talk about your specific case as well, right? So they're there for you, and the best approach is to find the one that's closest to you and then reach out to those folks. So we've got a question from John, who got the EIDL loan, so applied for the process, but was declined for the grant. So why might that happen? And is there anything that they can do about that if it does happen?
Okay, so if they applied for the EIDL loan and they were declined, it's really on a case-by-case
for the
basis.
Grant component. So they got the loan, but they didn't get the EIDL grant.
Okay, so it could be one of three things, right? They missed one of those qualifiers. So either they're not in a low to moderate income area based on the mapping tool, which was provided by the census, or they don't have less than 300 employees, or they were unable to show a minimum revenue decrease of 30%. So it's probably one of those three. And for more information on that, you can go to sba.gov/targeted EIDL. And there's our website there, and there's an FAQ that also goes into different scenarios that people can find their answers for their particular scenarios in that FAQ.
And is there a process that say, they said it didn't have the 30% decrease in those 8 weeks where, they were just off by a couple of weeks or something? Can they then resubmit that for consideration, or once they say no, are you pretty much done?
No, I'm going to put an email here. So for those of you who have questions in reference to your targeted advance application, whether you were declined or you're wanting to know what the status is, you can go to the targeted advance at sba.gov email and send them an email. Just provide them on the subject line, provide them with your application number so they can look you up by that application number. So like I said, SBA has different teams, if you will. There's a team of folks that is working on targeted advance only and supplemental advance. There's a team of folks who's working on EIDL reconsiderations. And then there's a team of folks that is working on EIDL increases. So you always want to make sure you use the proper emails depending on your particular situation. And what I'll do is I will add these emails here on the chat box so people can always refer to them.
Great. And so we've been getting a lot of questions coming in from nonprofits and asking, what is the criteria for a nonprofit? Can they apply for the grants? How does it work if you are a nonprofit that doesn't have sort of the traditional income revenue coming in, but relies on donations and all of that?
Well, one of the first things is that you can apply if you are what's considered a private nonprofit. So you need to see what your 501c3 or C6 or C7, you need to see what that designation is. If you are considered a private nonprofit, then you can certainly apply utilizing the same criteria as small business owners. And again, you can find that at sba.gov/EIDL. There's an FAQ on there that talks about nonprofits. Those are one of the questions that we have on there. So you are actually able to apply so long as you're a private nonprofit. So first step is to check that designation for your organization.
Fantastic. We got this question a lot last session, so not surprised to see it, but what about 1099 type salespeople, commission only people that sort of just have a 1099, they're not incorporated as a business? What's available for them from a grant perspective, if anything?
They can actually still apply. They can apply for the EIDL loan. If they qualify for the grant, they can apply. They still have to meet the criteria though, and commissions can be utilized as revenues. It's the gross receipts. So SBA is allowing that. So again, they can just follow the same directions and the same qualifiers as the other small business owners, but they are able to apply. They just need to be able to show the 30% reduction if they're going for the targeted, or the 50% reduction if they're going for the supplemental. And of course, make sure you're in the low to moderate income area and you either have less than 300 employees, or if they're 1099s, it's probably just themselves. So they'll definitely have the less than 10 employees for the supplemental. But first step is to go ahead and apply for the EIDL.
Fantastic. So let's take sort of these, if they're different, one at a time. These questions really come into the question of what can I use this money for, right? So if I'm applying for an EIDL loan, we'll just start there, and I want to use that money for a variety of things. Is there any limitation as a business owner for what I can actually use that loan amount for?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. So any of these SBA programs that we have, you can only utilize it to continue operating your business during this pandemic. So the programs that we're talking about today, they're COVID relief programs to help businesses, current business owner, continue to operate their business throughout this pandemic. So that is the primary thing that you can utilize your funds for, is if there's any business expenses, regular business expenses that you have incurred in order to continue operating your business. Now, a few great changes or enhancements that were made under President Biden and Administrator Guzman on September 8th or 9th, I believe it was, when they announced it. You can now use your COVID EIDL funds to pay down commercial debt and make monthly payments on any other federal debt that you may have that is business related. So I want to make sure people understand that. What you absolutely cannot use the funds for is to acquire another business, to start another business, or expand the business. You cannot use it for that. It is solely used for continuing to operate your current business throughout the pandemic.
It's all about recovery, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. And how about the grants themselves, the $15,000 potentially amount of money? Are any additional limitations on that, or is it all sort of the same?
Yeah, it's all the same. Remember, it's part of the same program. It's just a grant component. So we want to make sure that small businesses are utilizing it for the purpose that it was intended for, which is to continue operating your business throughout the pandemic. Now, Eric, I do see often either in the chat or in the Q&A, people are saying, well, what if I want to start a business? You know, does SBA have anything for that? And what I want to recommend folks who have that question or who are interested in starting a business is go to your local SBA office or to your local resource partners, because the resource partners, they work hand in hand with SBA. And these are partners like our SCORE chapters, Women Business Center, Small Business Development Centers. They know all of our programs. And SBA has a myriad of different loan programs that we work with banks for. So potentially there can be some type of program or service that we can offer you. So the first step is to go to your local SBA office or to your local resource partner.
Fantastic. Well, this one is going to go a little bit deeper into a very specific type of business, medical cannabis. Are businesses in that industry allowed to apply for either the COVID loans or grants?
That's a great question. And I'm looking it up right now, but originally, and I don't think it's really changed though. When COVID EIDL first started or during the CARES Act, and same thing with PPP, any of our programs, those industries that are in the medical cannabis area, they were not allowed to apply. But I would like to look into this a little bit further to see if anything has changed regarding that. I have not heard that that has changed, but I'm happy to kind of look into this and, you know, get back to you, Eric, and your team, and then maybe you guys can connect with the small business owner who had that question.
Fantastic. What we can also do is we'll make sure we'll post that when you have the answer into the Ask the SBA group. We'll post that question and the answer right there, so other people who may be interested in that can see it as well. And Jamie, hopefully you'll go there and be able to find that answer in the not too distant future. Marjorie, who received both the 5,000 and 10,000 EIDL grant, and wants to know now, still issues with cash flow. Can she go back now and get the loan?
Oh, yeah, she can go ahead and apply for the loan. That's not a problem. What I thought you were going to ask is if she can apply for the grant again, and the answer is going to be no. You can't do the grant twice, but you can certainly go for the EIDL loan. If you never receive funding for that and you qualify, just go to sba.gov/EIDL and apply right there, and go through the process. And if you qualify, you'll be able to get some funding for that. But remember, it is a loan, so you will need to pay it back. Good thing is, which I forgot to mention earlier, is that when the president and our administrator made that announcement in September, they also they made a 2-year deferment period for everybody who has EIDL loans. From the moment that your loan was signed, moving forward, you have 2 years deferment that you do not have to make any payments on. Now, interest rate is accruing, so I just want, I want you all to be mindful of that. But at least you have 2 years to take a little bit of a breather before you actually need to start paying those loans.
Fantastic. And quick question about the documentation. If I'm trying to verify the 30% loss of income over that 8-week period, what are we looking at to determine that?
Gross receipts. So you want to make sure. You want to make sure that you want to take a look at the gross receipts, and things that gross receipts will include all revenue in whatever form it's received or accrued in accordance with the entity's accounting method. So it could be sales of products or services, interests, rates, dividends, rents, royalties, fees, commissions. All of that is considered gross receipts. So you want to make sure that you take a look at that when you're looking to see if you qualify for these programs.
And if I applied for an EIDL loan, say 12 months ago, or in this case 17 months ago, and now want to go back for the grant, is that possible?
Yes. Actually, if you've done that and you qualify, you should have already received an email from SBA saying, hey, you qualify for this grant. Do you want it? We did a few email campaigns within the last few weeks. So we went through our database and we looked to see who already had EIDL and qualifies for the targeted advance, and we sent them an email letting them know, hey, you qualify. So if you didn't get that email, chances are that you don't qualify. But if you feel that you do qualify, make sure that you're part of that, low to moderate income area. You can have proof of the 30% minimum reduction in gross receipts or revenue, and then you have less than 300 employees. And if you feel that you do qualify, you can always email the targeted advance email and send that information to that team, and they will be in response. They will respond back to you. And I'll put that here on the chat for everyone.
Awesome. So we've got a lot of questions, again, like last time, around new businesses, right? So I started my business after COVID sort of took place. And, I'm struggling, wanting to keep my business going. What resources are available to me from the SBA? And because I know some of these programs we've been talking about, you have to show a decline in revenue. So if you didn't have revenue before, clearly that's not going to work. But how do you counsel business owners who have been in business just a short amount of time that are looking for resources and where they can turn to from an SBA perspective?
What I would say, there's a few things. You can go to sba.gov/relief and you'll see different programs. Like I said, our COVID program right now is the last one we have, the EIDL program for relief efforts for those who have been affected by COVID. But SBA does have other lending programs, different types of loans that we can provide. We also have different services that will help those that want to grow their business. So one of the things that I would say, it's always so important. If this pandemic hasn't taught us anything, it's this one thing: the importance for the small business owners to have a great relationship with their banks, their resource partners, and or SBA. And with wonderful, like the chambers, with Alignable, you guys have so many resources that you provide to your small business community. So it's really good to have these great connections and these great relationships with folks. But if you're struggling, if you just recently opened your business and you're struggling to get it going, you can go to sba.gov/local-assistance. So it's local-assistance, and put in your zip code. It's going to give you the information of your local SBA office and your local resource partners. You can choose whomever there you wish to contact, and they'll be able to help you and show you what other programs and services that we offer. And our programs and services are at no cost, so always keep that in mind.
That's fantastic. And, I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for our new finance marketplace, but, what we're trying to do is identify unique new lending alternatives that really care for small businesses. So look for that link in the chat, go check that out. We're going to be running a series of webinars like this to teach people about those new ways that technology and organizations like CDFIs, like ASEAN, are working with business owners who have struggled to get access to capital. And there's really some great, interesting programs out there. So stay tuned for all of that as well. So Jonathan asked a question about, he's got less than 10 employees, lost more than 50% of revenue. But when he put his zip code into that map, it didn't pop up as one of those low income areas. How is it that they determine what is low income? And is there any way to sort of appeal that process, or is it sort of a fait complete based on that zip code map?
Well, that map is from the Census Bureau. So SBA was not the entity that determines where everybody falls. That was out of our control. So we typically use the mapping tool that the Census Bureau has, and it's based on that. Now, I don't believe there's a way that you can, appeal that, but you can always, it never hurts to try, right? But I don't believe, as far as SBA is concerned, we can't make any changes to that mapping tool because it's just a tool. It's just a link that we got from the US Census Bureau, and then we are utilizing that to determine where people fall. And again, it's where your business falls, not your home address. So I don't know if that makes a difference in his particular case. And if you work from your home address and your home address is the one that your business is filed under, then you would utilize that too. Oh, one thing I want to say, Eric, because some people sometimes can be very resourceful, but it will backfire. Some people say, well, I'm going to change my business and put it into my husband's name because he does live, in a different area, or he has better credit than I do. So I know we'll be able to get the EIDL loan if I change the name and have it be under his. Don't do that. Because what happens is, as far as SBA is concerned, when we see that transfer of ownership, that means that it's a new business based on the date that ownership was transferred to someone else, even if it's your husband or your wife or your daughter or what have you. So don't change your transfer of ownership thinking that it's going to help you, because in essence, it'll hurt you because it looks like a new business to the SBA.
Mm-hmm. That's a great tip there. And this is sort of a very unique situation, but really an interesting one. So a gentleman had a business that started in 2019. They had, roughly $20,000 in revenue in 2019 as they were getting off the ground. Then in 2020, that grew up to about $120,000 in revenue. But since then has fallen precipitously, primarily because of challenges in the supply chain, which we've heard quite a bit about. And they've gone from that peak of 120,000 way down in 2021. Is there any provision for that type of situation in terms of applying for these EIDL loans? Because the amount, previous to the March of 2020 was very low, went up in 2020, and then down significantly in 2021.
Yeah, it went up and then down. I would say you would need to take a look at that period of time where the revenue went down and see if that correlates to the period of time that the EIDL program is requesting for proof of a reduction in revenue of 30% if they're looking to do the targeted and 50% if they're looking to do the supplemental. What I would suggest to that particular individual is, you don't lose anything by applying. So, this particular program is for those that have been affected, because of the pandemic and the disaster. And if that has happened to them, then I would say to go ahead and apply. And again, you go to sba.gov/EIDL and you can apply through there. But there is a frequently asked question document, an FAQ, that has a lot of questions and answers and a lot of different scenarios that you can potentially find some guidance in there as well. And you can also, of course, go to sba.gov/local assistance, local-assistance, and speak with your local SBA person or your local resource partner, and they'll be able to help you navigate those waters too.
Fantastic. Quick question about the dry cleaning industry as a whole, which has really been hit pretty significantly by COVID, with a lot of people working from home and such. They're not located in a low-income area, but they're trying to give advice to dry cleaning companies across the country about what they could apply for right now. It sounds like the key thing is just the EIDL loan if they're not in the low income programs. But is there any other advice you would give to someone who's trying to sort of inform an entire industry like that?
Well, one thing that we're happy to do at the SBA is, we do industry specific webinars. So if folks want, if you would like for us to do an industry specific webinar for the dry cleaning industry, we're happy to do that. And you can invite, all the dry cleaners, small business owners to that, and we can provide some assistance there. But as far as funding assistance, I would suggest for folks to apply for EIDL. Go to EIDL.com, SBA.gov/EIDL, apply there. Those that are those that qualify for the targeted or the supplemental will automatically be sent an email from the SBA saying, hey, you qualified, you want to move forward. So my first suggestion is have them apply for the EIDL loan. That's the very first step. If they need additional support or additional loans or funding to help them move forward, please contact your local office. We also have different programs that help folks as well, like our federal contracting program. It's a once in a lifetime 9-year opportunity to sell services and products to the federal government. And federal government, we are the #1 purchaser of goods in the world. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to go into the federal contracting program. That's just one of our programs that we have to help small businesses grow. So first, have them apply to EIDL. Second, have them contact their local SBA or their local resource partner, because they can show them all the different programs that we have.
Fantastic. We're going to go rapid fire here because we're almost at the end of our session. Okay. This is going to be LLC sole practitioner. Can they apply for EIDL loans or grants?
They can go to sba.gov/EIDL, and so long as they qualify on those different qualifiers that there is on that website, they can go ahead and apply.
But it is absolutely available to sole practitioners, right?
Yeah, even if you're just a business of one person.
Fantastic. Because they make up 81% of all small businesses, which I thought was a really cool stat that I came across the other day. And critical to our economy, that's for sure. So another question about, applied in September, waiting for the funds. Any way to speed up the process? Where do I go to kind of give the whole thing a big kick? And that during that time, the cap was 500. Since they haven't heard back, do they still get access to the 2 million if they finally do get approval and all of that?
Well, whatever they're approved for. So if at the time that they applied, they requested 500,000, because that's the maximum, they're going to look at their documentation and see what they qualify for. They may not get the 500,000, or maybe they will. But if they do and they want to try to get the 2 million, they would have to go back into the portal and request an increase. Now, something very important, you don't have to wait to get a response to request an increase. So if you've already submitted your application and it was for 500,000, but since then the cap has been lifted and now it's 2 million and you want to request additional funding, you can go back to your portal, put request increase, look for that bluish greenish button, and go through that process and request the increase. At the end of the day, the SBA is going to give you what you qualify for. So they're going to look at all your documentations, at your revenue loss, so on and so forth, and then they will say this is what you qualify for. But if you do wish to request an increase, you can do so now. You don't have to wait to get a response on your original application.
Fantastic. This is a really great topic. Not in a low income community, but minority owned, women owned, veteran owned. Are there any other programs that they should be aware of that they can take advantage of? This woman pointed out that for a Black women owned business, but I think, if we can cover all of those, and that would be fantastic.
Well, one thing I would say is go to SBA.gov and look at our federal programs, because you would be a perfect candidate if you've been in business for 2 years or more to apply for a federal contracting program, because it sounds like you are woman-owned, African-American owned, you're a minority, so you can do one or two things. You can get certified for each of those, because the more certifications you have, if you're certified women business owned, your competition in the federal contracting pool goes from this, if you're woman owned, to this, if you're African American, to this. So the more certifications that you have, the less competitive pool you have in the federal contracting program. So it's really to your benefit. But if you would like to have more information on how to get certified, SBA does this at no cost, or any of our programs like the federal contracting program, you can go to sba.gov and just spend some time on our website, and you'll find all the information on there.
Fantastic. And so I'm applying for an EIDL loan, and I now have this up to $2 million level. What criteria are they using to tell me whether I'm getting 50,000, 100,000, or $2 million? What are they basing that on?
It's really on the documentations that you're providing. So a lot of people ask, well, how is the loan amount determined, right? So the COVID EIDL loan is calculated based on your gross receipts for 2019 minus the cost of goods, which in essence means your expenses from the 2019 tax return and multiply that by 2. So the short answer is look at your 2019 tax return, determine what your expenses are and multiply that by 2. And then that's what you would be, that's the loan amount that you would probably qualify for, up to $2 million.
Fantastic. Well, I know we haven't taken much of a deep breath today. And, you know, as we wrap up here, I just wanted to once again thank you, Victoria. You are probably the most knowledgeable person I've ever encountered on all this, and willing to kind of rattle off and answer people's questions all over the map so effortlessly and so informatively. So I just wanted to once again say thank you for your time and for what you do at the SBA. It's been a wonderful session. I hope that we were able to answer your questions. Again, we do have a group on Alignable called Ask the SBA. It is an ongoing resource. Victoria has volunteered herself to check in there once a week or so and answer your questions. Please be patient because you know, she's doing this on her quote unquote free time as a wonderful resource to our members because she loves to help small business owners. But please go to that group. Ask your question there. Again, no personal information, just tell us what the problem is, and we will try and get you answers to the questions that you have on an ongoing basis. And we really appreciate you joining us today. And we hope that this session was as informative as you hoped it would be. And again, Victoria, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. All right, well, that will wrap up today's session. Look forward to sending out information about future sessions. I'm sure we're going to have Victoria back in the not too distant future. But thanks you all for attending today, and look forward to the next time. Take care, everybody.